Welcome to Two Woke Bonnets, a podcast where we revisit the classic TV shows of our Gen X childhoods and see how well they hold up today. With your hosts, Carol and Joey.
Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Two Woke Bonnets. And this is going to be a super episode because we're doing a two-parter. The Lord is My Shepherd, parts 1 and 2. Hi, I'm Carol.
Hi, I'm Joey. So it's episodes 13 and 14 of season 1, but we're going to talk about 13 first, right?
Yeah, right. So this is interesting because this is one of those instances where Michael Landon takes something from Laura Ingalls Wilder's actual life that she did not write about in the Little House books at all and puts it in the show.
Yes.
Because she did actually have a baby brother.
Yes.
But this episode starts out with Carolyn letting Charles know that she is pregnant.
And I do want to point out that the very first shot of this episode is you see a robin over a nest of eggs. And there is a lot of symbolism with birds throughout both episodes. So it's a little bird nest, and it's foreshadowing. So
yeah.
And
so Carolyn tells Charles she's pregnant. She does it in a very cutesy way.
Because she's not eating.
Yeah, and she doesn't want to, oh, there is something that will affect my weight. Well, there's only two things I know could affect you. And of course, he finally catches on that she's pregnant.
Because here's bingo card number 1. They do a knowing look.
Yes.
If you've got knowing look on your bingo card. Did I say my bingo card was number 9? So anyway, they have a knowing look.
Yes. So Doc Baker comes over and checks Carolyn and everything's going fine. And she starts to correct Charles because he starts referring to the baby as he.
Correct.
It's very obvious that he wants a son. He's got 3 girls, no boys, kind of wants a boy. He builds a very huge crib for newborn crib for his son, who's going to be huge and big and a boy. And then there's really not.
So Laura is already kind of concerned because he talks about a boy.
Yeah.
And she's a little bit concerned.
Yeah, she starts to feel a little bit left out because, she's the tomboy and Pa should view her as the son or something. But no, in fact, Caroline goes into labor because this happens pretty quickly. I mean, it's television, so they only have an hour. 9 months goes very quickly, and she tells Charles to ask Grace to stop by.
Yes, but she's not going to be able to. Caroline, Fridays are her delivery days. And she goes, yes, I know. Because instead of delivering the mail, she's going to be delivering a baby.
And it's a baby boy. Charles Franklin Ingalls. Charles Frederick. Yeah, because it was Freddie. Charles Frederick Ingalls Jr.
Yes. Now, I do want to mention... Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead and mention.
So one of the things that kind of bothered me about this is as she's going into labor, first of all there is a quilt. Now, all of a sudden, they've decided to hang a quilt up for the door. They don't hang it up any other time. So how they did the baby making without the door.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm a little bit concerned. And let's just recall, it's an open air way, right? And in previous scenes, we've seen that Carrie was at one end in the cradle. They never show that there's a wall between Carrie's room and their room. But now suddenly there is. And there was a quilt up. And then, but that's it. And the stairs are right outside. And there up top is Carrie, Laura, and Mary. And they're like, is Ma okay? And they ask about her coming out with as an egg. like hatching an egg and all this kind of stuff. They had Carrie. They had Carrie.
They
So
had to.
what did they forget from the time that Carrie was born?
But then Laura was like, "No, it'll be like my when the pony was born," which is true.
Which was true, and probably the most discreet way to handle the explanation without explaining the for parents who weren't prepared to have that conversation. But how do these girls not remember when Carrie was born? They're old enough that they should have remembered that. So that bothered me a little bit.
Mary is as dumb as the episode needs her to be.
Yeah. And then it's a boy and all this kind of stuff. But I do want to call out that when Pa first starts talking about having a boy, Laura keeps talking about how she's almost as good as a boy, how she's a tomboy before the boy arrives. And this is the time that we hear Johnny Johnson brought back up again.
Yeah.
He's mentioned because Johnny Johnson said she's as good as a boy.
That's
and
right.
Pa's like, well, it's not quite the same. The other thing that I thought was really interesting in this episode, and I don't know if it was just me, but Charles makes a point of telling Carolyn that he loves her 4 times. And it's not that they never said that because they've been affectionate up to this point. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But him coming out and saying, I love you, and love you. But he puts a lot of onus on her. Like it's up to her whether or not it's a boy. It's up to her about different things. And it's really not. It's really not.
No.
But anyway, go ahead.
So, yeah, I had that as an unwoke moment. The way he treats her as when she's pregnant. It was just weird.
Yeah.
But she has a boy. And of course, Charles is thrilled and he's fascinated and everybody is concerned with the baby. And Laura feels completely left out. She brings some homework home and he doesn't pay any attention to her anymore. But we get our first.
Yeah. And then she crumples it up and throws it in the water. But she was supposed to turn it into school. She doesn't bring it home. She did it for school.
She did it for school, and she was going to have her father just look at it. And he, of course, is too interested in watching the baby.
And I'm like, you're still going to have to turn the homework in, biatch. What are you doing? So anyway, sorry language.
Yeah, we get the first inkling that something's wrong with Charles Jr. because Doc Baker is showing up, and he's like,
So
first he says things are fine. He's not losing weight. He's not gaining, but he's not losing.
And Carrie says that that's her dolly. That's Carrie's word for this episode. Is she calls Freddie her dolly. And then Harriet does say Nels off screen one time. So you do get to check off Nels. Because she yells for him while they're trying to talk about the baby.
Yeah, and I had Harriet commits a crime here too, because
that's what I was going to ask you. Do we count that? So they have the picnic to do the baptism for Freddie, right? And she comes over and she says that, how many does that make now, Carolyn? 4? Wait, woman, you work in a store. You better know how to count. Okay, first of all. And second of all, she calls Carolyn a broodmare.
A broodmare. And I'm
like, I say that's a crime. Yeah.
I feel for Catherine McGregor, who plays Harriet Oleson in this episode, particularly these early episodes, because they made Harriet so loathsome in these early episodes. It turns more to comic relief, although she does some horrendous things. But now it's just this bitchy woman saying mean things to say mean things.
Yes. But it does come back. I mean, Ma comes back with a good comeback, though. She's like, because then Harriet talks about, after having Nellie and Willie, I just could not imagine having any more. And Carolyn's like, if I had Nellie or Willie, I couldn't think of having any more either. So
yeah, it's just plus. Come on, Harriet, you own a mercantile in a rural community. There's going to be big families there. There's going to be really big families.
It means that you're selling more stuff. So hush up, woman. It's good for business.
New customer.
But so then the joke that comes is that, Carolyn says she has a very hard time. She wanted to say something bad, and then they said, you can't say it on church grounds. And she says, you should pray for her or whatever. She goes, I can't pray for her. He says, well, pray for her husband. So she's like, I can do that. Okay.
So we have our second inkling that things are wrong because Doc Baker has shown up again, but now Charles Jr. is starting to actually lose weight. So he recommends them that they take him to Mankato to better doctors. And then the family says, everybody should pray.
Yes. So during the baptism, they have a picnic on the grounds. We do see the appearance of popcorn, but we had an off-camera ruling, and
it's not in bed.
Carol says it's not in bed, so you can't mark off popcorn in bed. I'm sorry, folks. It has to be popcorn
we're treating this
bed.
as an Ingalls kink here, so it has to be in bed.
But we have seen the nightcaps because then that's when we find out that Mr. Edwards calls the baby Freddie, and Carolyn says that is not the baby's name. The baby's name is Charles, but they're allowed to call him Freddie.
Which actually, in real life, that's what they called her brother. Her brother was 10 months when he died, but they called him Freddie.
So I do want to point out one other thing, that before they go to Mankato, one of the things that Doc Baker recommends is that they give the baby cow's milk. And so Ma starts boiling the cow's milk. Now, here's where we get a goof. This is where it's a woke 70s moment, but it's not necessarily an unwoke 24 moment, is that Frederick Ingalls died back in 1876. They didn't start doing nationwide pasteurization until the 1890s. They didn't discover to do that. So even though boiling the milk is a good thing because it kills off the germs, it's anachronistic. It would have been out of touch at that time. So I just want to point that out. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
But the girls go to bed and they're supposed to say a special prayer for Freddie, and Laura refuses. Yes. Because God didn't listen to her when she said that she wanted a sister, so why should he listen to her now? And Laura is being a class A little bitch.
Yes. And so, in my opinion, and Mary threatens to tell on her.
And she's like, go ahead. He won't listen to you. He's too busy with my brother.
But I do feel like this is the beginning of being Laura gets in trouble, because she gets herself in trouble later. But so if you want to check off that box, you possibly could.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
But they take the baby to Mankato to a doctor, and the doctor says that his red blood cell count is it's crashing, and there's nothing they can do. They know what's happening, but there's no way they can fix it. So here's where I got pissed at the doctor, because they're like, well, will he be in pain? And he's like, no, he'll just go to sleep. And then they call Charles into the room, but not Carolyn. So
I would consider that a 2024 unwoke moment.
Yeah, because they did not give her the opportunity to go say goodbye to her son.
Yeah.
Just Charles. And they go home, and of course they don't have the baby with them, and Mary's like, where's the baby? Come on, you gotta know.
Yeah.
You gotta know at this point. Yeah, and he's like, he's in heaven, and then Laura's like, no, and she runs away.
And she cries.
So
we have Ma crying, Pa crying, Laura crying, everybody's crying.
Everybody's crying.
So I will have to admit, I didn't realize it before, but I actually did get a bingo.
I did not.
So seriously, my bingo.
Look at this is my card. I'm like stymied once on every thing. So
I on card number 9, I got the O row, because Laura gets in trouble. Well, more episode 2, but Harriet commits a crime with the whole broodmare comment. Ma cries. Ma and Pa shared the knowing looks a couple times. And the pasteurization was a 1970s woke moment, but not there. But so anyway, So
bingo.
yeah. So Laura throws the map in the river, the whole thing. So
yeah. And that's the end of part 1.
Yeah. So yeah.
So here's where I'm going to claim that they edited this. Because when part 1 ended, I'm like, that's not where part 1 ended. Part 1, in my memory, always ended with Laura having already ran away. Like wrote the note, ran away, and she's climbing the mountain. She looks at the mountain and she starts heading toward the mountain. Music swells, fades to black. That was the end of part 1.
But that's not the way that it plays.
That's not the way it is now. I'm watching these on Peacock.
Me too.
I own the first 4 seasons. Have to dig them up, but I'm going to dig this episode up and see if it's correct in my memory, because there's a scene missing from part 2, which we'll get to.
Okay.
If the DVDs have the actual what they showed on television at the time, because I do believe that they cut a scene in part 2 and then they moved the end of part 1.
Okay. Well, let me tell you a couple facts before we jump into part 2.
Yeah.
A couple things. So when we get to the church, the couple times, when you look at the church, the bell is missing from Tinker Jones. So both of these episodes, the bell is missing. So this was filmed before. Yeah. And they played it out of a different order. So we didn't have a ton of special guests here. We saw the return of Grace Snyder, but I'm not going to consider her a special guest. Bonnie Bartlett, we've talked about her before. So the only 2 guests that we really had was William Court, who played Dr. Mayo. Unfortunately, he was not in Bonanza or Gunsmoke, so you can't knock him off for that. He did a lot of one-offs, but he wasn't really a big actor up to that point. He was one of those periodics. And then the nurse who says, "Doctor, can I speak to you for a moment?" Her name was Lori Lush. She's just listed as nurse. It is the only acting credit she has. So I don't know what happened to this poor woman, but she got grabbed and then she had total stage fright. And they cut it to as little as they could.
As possible, but that was a terrible line read.
It was a terrible line read. And if you look in, Charles Frederick Ingalls was the only Ingalls member who was actually born in Walnut Grove. Because we do have future members added to the family, as you know.
Yeah.
He actually died at 10 months.
Yeah.
So not as quickly as they had this particular baby. If you look at the records, it's typically listed as a diarrhea. They spelled it differently back then. But children who had diarrhea quite often had dehydration as a result. And so that's kind of where that all came in. So he was alive from November of 1875 to August of 1876. So just a little less than a year. But it was from dehydration. And they would sometimes fall asleep and just not wake up because they dehydrated so quickly. So
yeah. But she does not write about that at all in the Little House books, because there's a chunk in between Walnut Grove and South Dakota that she doesn't write about because it was miserable and she couldn't make it happy.
for
Or
children.
she couldn't put she couldn't put a nice sheen on it for kids. And her brother is part of that. She just didn't write about it. She did write about it in her autobiography, Prairie Girl, but not in the Little House books themselves, which is why when you read them, it's abrupt. When you start by the shores of Silver Lake, there is obviously a few years gap.
Yeah.
And she just comes out and says, "Oh, Jack died and Mary's blind." So
yeah.
So I think Jack was kind of the substitute for her little brother in that instance. But
So the interesting thing in this is that in the opening credits for episode 13, they actually give a nod to Ernest Borgnine, but he does not appear in episode 1
until part 2.
So it's a teaser, but it is a 2-parter. Okay, so let's go ahead and start over. Yeah. Oh, I do want to mention is that when Carolyn had the baby, we had another picture of the little robin with the bird's nest and the birds all hatching. That's how we knew time passed. Then we see her with her belly and all that kind of stuff. And then it's that day that she does it. So the birds are in there again. Okay, go ahead.
So part 2 now opens with Laura with another church picnic. And they're grieving. I think Charles says it's been a few weeks. So obviously it's been a few weeks since Freddie died. But they're at a church picnic, and Laura goes to talk to Reverend Alden,
because he's just such a warm and fuzzy,
and he gives such great advice. But he tells her that God listens. He doesn't always make the judgment we want, but God listens. But then he says, the closer you are to God, the more he listens.
Yes.
Which Laura takes to mean I need to go climb a mountain to talk to.
Yeah. Well,
so she's little, and she doesn't get
this in her head.
Yeah.
And then once she decides that that's what she wants, is she wants an exchange.
Yeah, she's going to offer herself
her life for Freddie's life.
For Freddie's, yeah.
And then she goes back out and says, "Come on, Pa, let's play every game we've ever played ever."
And they have the best day ever. Yeah. And so they play all the games, and you'll remember it forever, won't you, Pa? I love you more than anything. And he says, I love you. And it's like, oh, I guess there's things he loves more than you.
Yeah.
But they have the best day
and ever. I have words about that too, because she goes, I love you more than anything. But then when she's up on the mountain with Jonathan, she says something else, but we'll talk about that.
So that night she writes a note saying it's all her fault. She had bad thoughts, and she's going to go talk to God. And she apparently puts Miles behind her in the middle of the night, because they can't
let's
find
not
her.
Forget when she got so mad when Jack got lost, she walked beside the wagon in the pilot.
She was on her way back to Kansas.
She knows how to do it. And at first I was annoyed by this, because she got up in the middle of the night, she got all dressed, she did all that, but she didn't take a coat.
Yeah.
And she didn't braid her hair. But then you realize the reason why she didn't braid her hair is because they needed the stunt person to wear a wig so the hair would cover the face, because besides, she's going to climb up a mountain. Now let's be clear, there are no mountains in Minnesota.
Yeah, I was like, what part of Minnesota is
these mountains that you see are not in Minnesota?
Everywhere.
Also, the mountain that she chooses to climb, when she gets to the top, there are other mountains around her that are higher.
Yeah. So I don't know what part of Minnesota. Maybe she walked all the way to Colorado. I don't know, but she
rips her dress. Both of her sleeves
very strategic rips on shoulder, and there's a nice little hole on the bottom. But yeah, she
but you don't see how she got that. No.
But she climbs the mountain, and she prays to God. She wants to switch, and then she lays down and go to sleep, and then she wakes up and there's a coat around her.
Lays down to go to sleep at the ledge. Doesn't go inward.
Well, stays at the ledge. She shares that bed with Mary. She's not moving anywhere. She's one of those slightly crunch sleepers.
The coat is not just on top of her; it's under her, which means that whoever did that had to pick her up and put her under, back down on the ledge. Can we just mention that? Bring her in a little bit, just a foot or two. I'm just saying. Okay, go ahead.
So she wakes up and she meets Jonathan, who's the strange man that speaks somewhat strangely, and he has conversations with God, and he lives on the mountain because it's Jonathan's mountain.
Yes.
He's Jonathan. Thank you, Tom Bombadil. But she won't tell him what she wants God to do, but she hangs around him. Meanwhile, back at the farm, they've woken up and they realize Laura's gone. And then they find her note.
But they go by her note 4 times. First of all, if you read in the books about how precious the China Shepherdess is, the fact that Laura sticks it behind with the paper behind it, what happens if the paper falls over? with Smash Moss, China Shepherdess.
They're
Which
not even going to look
all
for
the way
him.
from the East Coast. I was a little concerned. I had a moment of concern. And
Yeah,
then Bob Carr just like, oh, well, let me look down here. Let me look down here. Can't
let me
possibly
put the wood in the fire and not look at
right in
anything.
front of my face. Oh, what is this? Yeah.
But her note says that she had wicked thoughts, and Pa's like, she ever had a wicked thought in her body, and Mary, of course, is like, what the hell? But because she starts crying again, and
First of all, she just get frozen for a second.
yeah,
Stands there. She doesn't know what. Now, here's the thing. Okay, let me come up. Sorry.
you're getting verklempt.
Mary, I get so like, so Mary's bothering Laura in the previous episode, right? In the award, the previous story, and with her reading. So Laura kicks her out, and she ends up going to the barn because she can't sleep, right? But then she comes back and does her homework in the previous episode by the light because she didn't get it done because she was at the store. So clearly they're pretty light sleepers because they wake each other up, but then they don't wake each other up. So like, how did Laura not only, because when Mary got up, she went down the stairs in her nightgown, put her coat on, and then went out to the barn. And she didn't wake anybody up. But Laura, she was on the outside, right? But she gets out of the bed, gets
dresses,
doesn't take her coat, with boots,
writes her note,
a note, and nobody hears it. So anyway, just wanted to make that point.
But Mary tells them she wouldn't pray for Freddie, and so Charles looks through town and can't find her, and then he calls on Edwards, and it's like, we're gonna go hunting for her. They look at all of her little fishing spots and stuff, and she's not there. So they go hunting for Laura. Meanwhile, Laura's hanging out with Jonathan, and Jonathan's telling her all the ways of God, and he fashions a little cross for her that has her name on it. And this is where we get the editing, because there is an entire scene, because he gives her the cross and he's like, let's go wash up before we talk to God. There's an entire scene of her washing in the lake or in the stream, because he's telling her, be sure to get behind your ears. And she's really, really scrubbing behind her ears, and she knocks her cross off. And it goes down the stream.
It's true. We never get that explanation.
Yeah. And she's like, oh no, my cross. And he's like, wait, child, wait. And he finds the dove that has a damaged wing. None of that is in this episode on Peacock.
Probably
we
because
just cut to her in front of the fire, no cross, and the damaged and the dove. She's petting the dove. And I'm like, they cut an entire scene out. And I'm like,
because it's an older man alone with a little girl.
A little girl, and she's in just her undershirt.
Yet previous episodes we've
just had her topless.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's because she's with Ernest Borgnine.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there's a whole.
I consider the dove a reason to go ahead and click someone gets hurt. Because
I had already kind of chosen Laura because she was bruised a little bit and scraped when she climbed the mountain.
So double hit.
But that whole scene is missing. And now I want to dig out my DVDs to see if it was actually on the DVD, because that it leaves a gap as to what happened to her cross. How did her cross get downstream? And what the hell is this dove?
They do talk about getting washed up by the river.
Mm-hmm.
But they never mention the cross being lost.
When I sat down to watch this, I'm like, oh, because I'm not entirely religious, and I always hate it when the show went into the literal religion. We're to believe that Jonathan is an angel that God sent down to tell Laura to wash behind her ears, except now he doesn't do that anymore. But we're to believe that he is an angel.
It could be, or it could not be. They leave it open-ended, but there's an assumption that this is heavily implied
that he is an angel. He's an actual angel.
Well, because
And
otherwise
I never
she's alone with a crazy person on a mountain for 3 days.
Exactly. So I
Who
never
made her
liked it
wash behind her
when the
ears.
show
Yeah.
strayed into that territory where this is literal. It's a literal miracle. But it just kind of leaves a plot hole because they've cut this scene out and now you don't know how she lost her cross or what the hell this stuff is. But they have the talk that, God doesn't always answer the way you want him to answer. And she's like, well, I'm going to try one more time the next day. And she's firmly believed that this is the last time she's going to see Jonathan.
Yeah. So
And
let's talk about what's happening while she's up on the mountain. Pa realizes he needs to go after her, but has no idea where she's gone. So what does he do? He goes into town. He asks Mr. Oleson if he's seen them, and they're like, no. And they're like, ask Mrs. Snyder if she's seen him. And where's Mr. Edwards? And because he's got to grab Edwards. Then he goes, and this is one of the times that we see, Dirk Blocker was, the student that Carolyn taught. We never see him again. But the person doing the horseshoe, that's his dad. So that's the third time we see him. And he walks in and he says, hey, I need a saddle horse. He's like, take what you want. Not for how long do you need it? Anything like that.
Where are you going with it?
Say
What
my
are you doing
daughter's
with it?
missing. I need to find her. He's
You
like,
think,
okay, take whatever you want. And
wouldn't
he
you raise
finds
a
Mr.
posse?
What?
Wouldn't you raise a posse? Wouldn't you go into town and go,
This is what I'm saying. And I was frustrated because Reverend Alden, it was his words that caused her to decide that going up a mountain was the way to do it. And they saw her go in, say she forgot her shawl, and she did.
Yeah.
She picked up a shawl, which once again, she didn't even take that
which
up
I'm sure
the
she
mountain
left
with
there.
her. But they go back through town like 3-4 times and say, well, she couldn't have walked this far. But it's like, you have a whole circle. Like, how are you, unless you do concentric circles, you're never going to find this kid. Like, this is really kind of crazy. You have no idea what she's thinking. It's not implied in the letter, just that she did bad things and she's hoping to do something different. So she's, so then they go through town again. They go by Ma. And then Carrie, her line in this episode is, you gonna bring back Laura and my baby brother? And Ma's
like, with my baby brother. It's like, oh my God. Okay. Shut up,
this
Carrie.
This is why this child should never speak again. So okay. So then Laura decides that this is just not gonna work. And so she has to go to a higher mountain. Yeah. Which like once again, there are higher mountains all around her. She never tries to go higher. In fact, when she goes to talk to God, she goes lower. She goes lower.
She's going lower.
If this is the preface that she has to get as high to God as she can, why would she not go up higher? And the river is so much lower from where they go to wash up from where they were. But anyway, so Jonathan realizes if she leaves, he's got to keep her there somehow. Yeah. Right? He doesn't offer to take her back to town.
No. He just wants to keep her there, which is coming off as kind of creepy now, except you're supposed to believe that he's an angel.
Unwoke
and
woman.
That he knows Pa is on his way.
Yeah. So try, because at first she doesn't tell, then finally she does kind of tell that she feels like, Pa needs a boy more. I'm an extra. I'm a spare. No, baby, Carrie's the spare. Take Carrie up the mountain. But anyway, so then Jonathan says, oh, you know what we need to do is we just really need to get God's attention. Let's build a fire on top of the mountain. Have we learned nothing about fire from all the previous episodes with fire?
Apparently not.
Have we not seen enough fire? There's been lots of fire, people, and I'm going to keep saying the word fire with 2 syllables because why are we having a fire?
Well, but somehow attention. Look, the angel apparently can't make light or anything like that. He's got to build a fire.
He can make porridge. Anyway.
But they build this huge fire to try and get God's attention. And unfortunately, it gets Charles's attention. And he has found the little cross in the river that says Laura. So they're
Well,
following
because
the
they were
river
thinking
anyway.
that they were going to go downstream, but it
Yeah.
floated down from upstream. So that was the
So they're going
sign.
upstream. Yeah.
Because this sentimental thing that Laura never had before, just because it's got this very unique, unusual, nobody else in the county could possibly be named Laura.
Laura.
It must be hers. I've never seen
Yeah.
it before in her life, but it must be hers. And so
Yeah.
he knows to go upstream. And then as they're going upstream, then they see the fire. Edward sees the fire in the sky.
Yeah.
And so now they go rushing up the mountain with these horses that they've been riding to death for 3 days.
Yeah.
And they get to a certain point where they cannot go any higher. So what do? They jump off the horses. They do not tie these horses up. They do not do anything to secure these horses so that they can find them later because they're miles from home. Right?
Yeah. But no, they got to run up the mountain. And then Laura sees them and she's like, no, not yet. And she goes to run away. But Jonathan stops her and is like, he has entered you, child.
Yeah.
This is, he said no. And then of course, Pa and Laura lock eyes and she's like, oh, Pa. And she runs to him and then he carries her home because apparently she climbed the mountain, but she can't climb back down.
Yeah. Good luck finding the horses, by the way. Hope you can find them. Also, Hans Dorfler, you're SOL when it comes to those horses. I've ridden them hard for 4 days. Thank you so much for playing. Yeah.
That's what you get for loaning to Charles Ingalls. But she tells him about Jonathan, but Jonathan has disappeared and the dove flies off. And I guess we're supposed to think that that's.
And then we see the dove right at the end.
Yeah.
And the dove goes from being a gray cooing dove to being the white dove of peace.
Yes.
Symbolism. Okay. So let's talk about a couple things. There were things in the notes in the IMDb, other than the fact that the mountain doesn't exist in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Is that this episode or this part of this two-parter of climbing up the mountain and this redemption moment of getting forgiveness or finding, the thing is a reworking of an episode from Bonanza. So even though none of the guests are from Bonanza, it's a reworking of an episode from the 1965 season of Bonanza called All Ye His Saints, which featured Clint Howard, Ron Howard's younger brother. When he was a boy, he sees his father die, and an Indian tells him that if you go up this certain mountain, that God will answer prayers. And so he goes up this mountain looking for somebody, and instead of finding a Jonathan type, he actually finds a guy who is wanted for heinous crimes. but the little boy, wins him over and he protects him and all this kind of stuff. So there's your link to Bonanza for this week. Ernest Borgnine, of course, plays Jonathan. He was famous before being in this episode. He was in McHale's Navy. He'd already won an Oscar for Marty, which is one of my favorite films. Not a very woke film these days, but one of my favorite films. One I related to. He had actually received over 20 awards and 10 additional nominations, including a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor later in life. But this man had over 210 film and television credits, not including appearances, producer, anything like that behind the scenes, which he did that as well too. 220 acting credits. One of the things they also want to point out is the name of this angel is what?
Jonathan.
And what was the name of Michael Landon's character in Highway to Heaven?
Jonathan.
So it could have been a reworking of Jonathan coming forward to the new world. So just want to point that out as well.
Ernest Borgnine also famously was married to Ethel Merman for 30 days. If you read her autobiography, it does have a chapter titled My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine, and it's a blank page.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I've heard that before, but I forgot about it. I haven't read that autobiography. Now I'm gonna have to. Yeah. So let's talk about my card, your card. So this was a two-parter. I don't consider it cheating because it is a two-parter. But I had bingo card number 9. I had a Frozen Mary. Someone dies because Frederick dies. Willie stands in a corner. We didn't see that. Guest was on Bonanza. No, but the plot line was, but I'm not going to count it. Laura gets in trouble. We had nightcaps. Nobody had a fever that breaks. Nellie does, Mrs. Oleson does say, "Oh, Nels," calling for him. Laura cries. Harriet commits a crime, calling Carolyn a broodmare. Ma cries over the death of her child. Of course, free space justice for Jack. There was no lemon for Bina mentioned this time.
No.
There was a 2024 unwoke moment in there with the whole bathing and stuff like that. Carrie speaks, but she says she shouldn't have been allowed to speak in this episode. Nellie and Laura do not fight, but someone does get hurt. Both Laura gets hurt and the dove gets hurt. There was popcorn, but there was no popcorn in bed.
Popcorn in bed. That's what
there
kept
was
me
no child in the outhouse moment. But Ma and Pa did share several knowing looks. Most of them were in the first episode. There was no ethnic stereotypes. I didn't feel like Ernest Borgnine was brought as an ethnic stereotype. And for the brief moment that Hans Dorfler was, he really didn't do anything.
Yeah, he doesn't have a German accent at all. So
there were wild animals, but they did not attack. But Pa did cry. And Laura wasn't really lost. There is a search for a child, but she wasn't lost or held hostage or kidnapped. So I didn't count that. But then the pasteurization was a woke moment for the 1970s, but it was 20 years too early. So I did get a bingo. I got it on the letter O going down, but you did not.
The two that kept me from bingos, Laura and Nellie didn't fight, and there was no popcorn in bed. Everything else I had more than one, or there was no Old Man Tucker either. That would have also given me a bingo.
Yeah. So
there was Mr. Edwards, but he did not sing Old Man Tucker.
But I think this is the first episode where I got a bingo. And I did get it in episode 1. So if you wanted to get mad at me for having 2 episodes, you can't, because I got it. So now listen, if when you go on there and you pick your first bingo card, you don't know how to clear it, just go over to the help and it will give you a click so you can pick a new episode, a new bingo card each episode. So and we are I keep going back in and editing, putting things in that might come up in the future. Just to help up our chances and give us more variety. So
and we will be once the show goes on, we'll be changing some of these, to add stuff for Albert. We'll definitely need to take Mary is frozen off, because once she goes blind, she's frozen most of the time. So,
well, that could be kind of like a free cell. Mary's still blind.
So yeah, there's a few that will drop off, and we'll have to add some once we get later in the show. But
so I know that the award was not one of your favorite episodes. What are your feelings towards this 2-parter?
This one I've seen many, many times, obviously, because I immediately pegged that the first part didn't end properly. I just dislike it when the show goes literal with its theology. It's fine, saying it's a miracle that Pop put a 2-inch block of wood on a kid's shoe. But this actually wants you to say, no, it was a miracle. It was an absolute miracle because an angel made it happen. And I'm like, I like it more when it's nebulous. Could be, couldn't be. But this is obviously saying, no, Jonathan is an angel. He talks to God regularly, and he told Laura originally to scrub behind her ears. So it's just, I don't like it when he gets that literal with its spirituality.
Yeah. And then
maybe we should have a square Reverend Alden gives really crappy advice.
Yes, I kind of feel like Reverend Alden butts in is the thing. Because once again, this guy is only here monthly. He comes in, he does his damage, and then he disappears.
And then he leaves.
Think about how much time Pa and Mr. Edwards could have saved if they had known that he's like, you have to be closer to God. And they would have been like, well, this is a child. She's going to think,
oh, go higher.
Yeah. So I did want to point out one thing I totally forgot to even write down, but there was a funny moment with Doc Baker where Caroline hands her a bucket. Actually, the bucket looked a lot like our little cups. And she says to him, here's 6 eggs. They're all double yolkers. Well, how would you know they're double yolkers? I never know they're double yolkers till I open them up. So
candle?
Oh, well, okay. So she candled 6 eggs and found out they were double yolkers, gives them to Doc Baker. And she says, I feel bad paying for your services with the eggs from the chickens you gave us. And he says, but I never got them to lay eggs when I had them. So he was like, I'll bring you back the pot. So no copper pot for Mr. Tinker Jones, but I did think that was funny.
I don't think his bell was on the church this time either.
No, neither of these episodes, because these episodes were recorded out of time.
Yeah, you kind of can tell with Melissa Gilbert. She looks far younger here than she did like a couple of episodes ago. It's not like a lot, but she looks a little younger.
Yeah.
So it's obviously his first few were out of order. But next week we get our first Christmas episode.
Yay! Deck the halls with Little House of the Prairie. Woohoo! All right, so make sure you come back, pick your bingo card, play along with us. If you got a bingo on your card, tell us which card number you used. Remember, you can reach us at 2wokebonnets@gmail.com. And if you did get a bingo, let us know, and I will send you a free 2 Woke Bonnets sticker. Yeah. So you can have one too. Don't you want one? They're so pretty.
We're starting to get things. We'll have to think of some things for a Patreon, maybe.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that was The Lord is My Shepherd, part 1 and 2. And we will see you next week when we do Christmas at Plum Creek. Bye.
Thanks for listening to 2 Woke Bonnets. To find out more and to download your bingo card, visit 2wokebonnets.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever fine video and audio podcasts are played.